So I learned how to fix something that has been vexing me for a long time today. And while the little bug isn't very important, the way that I found to track it down and solve it, I thought is something that many of you should know more about. So first, the bug. I have this application I'm writing, and at some point during the process of running it, it turns on my logger, which I'm not a huge fan of. This provides more information to the system or to the screen than most users will care about. So I'd really prefer that this didn't get turned on for me. Now, the way that I know logging gets turned on in Python is using this logging.add. It's logger.add handler. So this here, what it does is it adds some kind of processing that when a logging message is triggered from inside of my code, the handler is what decides where it gets saved to, if anywhere. So what I know is happening is that this add handler function is getting called somewhere and I don't know about it. So let's figure out where. And the way that I wanted to do, or thought to do this, was using a tool in Python called mock. So mock is something that's primarily used in unit testing, where I can take a function buried deep in my library and assess if it's being called, what arguments were passed to it, so I can do particular tests like seeing whether a certain class is called, or if I want to avoid calling some very expensive function, I can put it inside, I can mock it such that it will always return a value that I want. And that's what this example is showing here, and I've got some examples of where I've used this in my testing before. So long story short, going back to my original problem, I'm going to use magic mock to detect where I'm calling that add handler function, which is causing all my problems. So I'm going to just paste in the answer to this and then explain what it does, because you're going to see a little bit of typing, but let's go through it. So here is that mock statement that I described. I'm going to this logging library and finding the uses of add handler and replacing them with a new function, which we're going to call fail. All fail is going to do is print its current position within the call stack of where this function is being called, and then do nothing. So ideally what's going to happen here is when some culprit calls add handler, it's not going to call and add a new handler to my stream. It's going to print out where it is in the execution and tell me by printing that to screen. So now that I've got all of this pasted in, let's go and see what is actually happening. Let's call it again. And yep, see here, all of this stuff is calling to the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and kill it and show you how I can track down the offending bit of code. So see these lines here. Sorry that my terminal isn't colored, but you can see what's happening is add handler gets called by a call to basic config, which is triggered when I call logging.debug inside of my Colmena library. So this isn't desirable. I don't want that to actually happen. And so what I can do is go to that section of my Colmena library, change this from logging.debug to logger.debug, and that's going to fix my problem. What's happening now is I'm running this code. It's no longer calling login.debug, it's calling logger.debug, which is not going to have the side effect of adding a new handler. And I was able to detect where that handler was getting called again by mocking the operation and having it print its call stack. You notice nothing came out of here. So I can go back to my source code now. I can remove my mocking, which I use to track down that error. Oops. Sorry for moving around a lot. Let's remove this patch. And let's rerun this code again. And what we're hopefully going to see here, what I actually found earlier, nothing gets printed to screen, which is what I wanted. Everything's fixed. because I knew what my problematic call was happening because I understand a bit about logging. I mocked that operation and added a shim which told me where it was getting called from. I used that to track down something in my library. I changed that operation, and I learned something new about logging while I was at it. Check this out. I didn't know this one bit of line about how Python's logging works. Now I do. So now I know to avoid that problem in the future. If I call login.debug, it's going to mess with my logging handlers. It'll add one if there isn't. If I use a different operation, that's not going to happen, so everyone's happy. Yep, so that's everything for today. A little bit on how to use tools for testing to help you debug.